So today we're going to cover an interesting topic around the movement or the community or whatever you want to call it of health at every size, with the concept being that no matter what size you are, you can attain health. You should cherish the health, and you should embrace the health and embrace the image, etc. So we're gonna discuss this concept, look at the pros, look at the cons, and give our view on all this. So let's kick it off by introducing what this actually is all about, what it means, and where it's come from.
So want me to go ahead? Where you want to go?
Yeah, I can go if you want. So this was originally brought about by a lady called Linda Bacon, and she basically had felt like the fight on obesity that I guess we're currently in just wasn't working, and then proposed that instead of trying to fight it, that instead we should basically accept it, and instead of trying to be getting upset or frustrated about our the world or society's inability to really sort the issue, is to just actually focus on embracing it and being happy in the state that we currently are. So the first time I heard about it, I thought it was ridiculous, if I'm honest. But then the more I dug into it, I do think it is based on some fairly good stuff or some good intentions. But I think, as with a lot of things in this industry, whether it's to get more clicks or whatever, more attention, it's gone to a far extreme. So I mean, the basic components, or the three things they say they kind of live by, are respect, critical awareness, and compassion for self-care, which are all things, R&T, we're massive on all three of those. And the main focus around health at every size is that instead of being focused on the numbers in terms of losing weight, that you should be focusing on the process of being active, eating well, looking after your mental health. Now, as we know, if you do those things, that quite often, if you are overweight, results in weight loss. But their big thing is really not to be focusing on weight loss, but just the process, which again, I think is actually something that as a worldwide community, we could actually really benefit from being more process driven, not just looking at those before and afters all the time, but actually looking at the behaviors that you're going to have to implement day to day, focusing on that, putting good habits in your life. And then, as we know, that probably will result in weight loss. I think, in my opinion anyway, where I would start to disagree is that we have to just accept being overweight or unhealthy, or I know they claim that you can be healthy, but that we should actually look to use that focusing on the process, but to then actually still get physical changes that evidence has shown, put us in a healthier position. And I think this is where pushing to such an extreme has probably taken things too far in my eyes. I think if, as in any area of life, you're an activist, you start to ignore evidence. And I think that's what's going on here with regards to being healthy at every size. That's my initial take on it anyway. What was your thoughts, Ivan?
That was really, really well put. And a lot of the points, of course, I agree with. And yes, I think the general consensus of the message that's being spread is, showing self-compassion, not focusing on numbers, focusing on the process, focusing on just living a healthy lifestyle through intuitive eating decisions, which we can touch on probably a little bit later, and why I don't agree with it yet. Doing activity for the sake of activity. This is another thing they really touched on, was you're not exercising to burn calories or to lose weight. You're exercising because you enjoy exercising, and you do it because of all the other benefits that come with exercise, not because you're punishing yourself with it. So I think there again, when I first heard the actual slogan, I was just like, bullshit. That's not correct at all. This is people making an excuse to want to be late, or they're just excusing themselves for being lazy, for not actually wanting to achieve anything substantial, and they're just accepting defeat. That was my initial reaction. And part of me still thinks that way, because this again is obviously anecdotal. Again, we probably have a very strong bias to the physical, because in my perception, if you are doing all of those things and you are focusing on all of those things, then you by default should actually be losing weight, right? If you're prioritizing healthy nutritional choices a lot of the time, you're prioritizing, they talk about self-care, but how can you say that I'm prioritizing my self-care yet I'm obese, clinically obese? You know? And then if we're using the term, again, the whole obesity terminology has come from BMI, right? And we know that BMI isn't 100% accurate when it comes to people that have more muscle mass, even different races. There's this ongoing debate now that BMI is discriminating against races, which again, this is not something we're going to get into here. But again, from a BMI definition, being clinically obese, you are still running the risk of a lot of health morbidities. You're running the risk of catching infections. What has the NHS and any sort of reputable health organization said about the C word, right? Like the biggest risk factor for you getting that is, or one of them is being obese, right? Like, so there are so many health issues that come with obesity that we've seen, like all the application forms we get, the people that are wanting to reverse a lot of their health ailments that are a result of being excessively overweight or carrying excess body fat, whether you're happy with that body fat or not, you're still putting your body in a place that it is not at optimal health. So I think that statement, like health at every size, so does that mean you're healthy at 500 pounds if you're happy? Think about being someone who is 500 pounds, the burden they are on not just their family, but on society as well. How is that healthy at every size? Now, again, I don't want to be attacking here. I'm not trying to discriminate against anyone. And we can go on the other end of the spectrum. Is anorexic healthy at every size? Because I think a big reaction to this whole movement came about where there was this sort of viewpoint that thinner equals healthier. Thinner equals better than obese. And they took that sort of statement, and then this is where we've gotten all these paths and all these weird examples, and that people should sort of be happy with where they're at, which I agree with. But there's nothing wrong with trying to improve your physical, to not only improve your health, but to also just improve your well-being, your general mood. I don't know about you guys, but have we ever received an application form, someone being normal weight and saying, I really want to be obese? Like, when has that ever happened? Has anyone ever consciously decided to go, I want to go from normal weight to obese because I think that'll make me happy?
You think with the whole obese, like being obese and being quote unquote happy about it, do you think that's genuine? Do you think you can actually have self-compassion and self-love when you are obese? Because getting to an obese state requires a lot of like punishment, right? You don't do that by accident. You can't accidentally get to 300 pounds. You can overeat a bit and again cut like 10 pounds. You can't overeat your way to 300 pounds. You have to really go for it, right?
Yeah, I think you've hit a really good note there, because their argument is that the reason people aren't normally happy at these higher weights is because of social stigmas, and people being discriminatory towards people who are overweight, and that's something that I think we'd all be against, and it's definitely something that shouldn't be happening. But I think what you said is so important there, is to get to that weight, regardless of any social stigmas, you need to you're not overeating to that extent. I'm just saying this as a broad statement. So I know there may be one or two people out there it's not the case for, but through hunger, it's coming from using food as a crutch or low levels of activity as a way to either deal with emotions or stress. So although, people may not like being overweight because of the way society's set up, what you said there is so true, in that you don't get to that position unless food and or these unhealthy behaviors are being used as a way to cover something else up, which what I would say would be a sign of not being truly fulfilled or happy.
Well, in the reason why I wanted to talk about this, in Cosmopolitan, there was a big thing this year. I don't know if you saw it, Ivan, in Australia, but Cosmopolitan, like one of the most famous women's magazines, had a big thing on, let me just get out what they called it. They called it 11 Women Who Prove Wellness Isn't One Size Fits All. And on the front cover of February's magazine, they had a picture of a woman who was quite substantially overweight. And it said, "This is healthy," in big in big bold lighting, said, "This is healthy." And it was basically to show that no matter what size you're at, you can be really healthy. But what they really emphasized was this lady who was quite substantially overweight saying this is healthy. And I just can't see how that can be the case. Now, this is separate from the health at every size movement, because the health at every size movement is a bit more strategically done and a bit more deliberate. This was just saying, blanket statement, this is healthy. And I just can't see any scientific reasoning or physiological reasoning, psychological reasoning why you can be healthy at 250, 300 pounds.
No.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think the thought process behind it, of it, like empowering people who are overweight or are struggling with these things, I think has good sentiment. But the thing that I think would be so much more empowering would just be to give people the education and control to be able to be the weight that they want. Because it's a bit like saying, I'm really struggling to play the guitar. It's more empowering to just actually set out a timetable when you're going to practice and then get past that and get good at guitar. I'd find that a lot more empowering than just saying, you know what, it's actually okay if you don't play the guitar. And I mean, you know, it's fine to do either, but it's a lot more empowering to actually get past that obstacle, rather than just being like, oh, you're struggling with your exams at school. All right, we just won't do any exams this year just so you don't feel bad. You know, like it's the short term, maybe just help you feel better right there and then. But ultimately, is that the way you're going to progress in life?
Yeah, and imagine taking that. Yeah, as you said, Ed. Imagine that attitude now drip feeds into all other areas in your life. You're trying to go for a job that you don't want. Someone's like, just accept that you don't want that job. That's fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. That's what you've done with your physique. That's what you've done with your health. And again, like I know for many people listening, we may be sounding like we are coming from a physical bias, but you also need to understand the amount of lives that we have seen transform for the better in all areas has been accompanied by also going through a physical transformation of sorts. Now, again, we know correlation is not causation, and we also know that there are people that take the physical to the extreme and suffer health consequences because of that. And I was teetering on that edge for a while. I admit that. So again, there is nuance, but in general, as I said earlier, we've never seen someone not be happy or not be happier or not be in a better place in all areas once they've achieved a physical transformation that they're proud of. I'm not saying it answers everyone's problems, because it definitely does not, but it allows you to be I'm not going to say better, but it allows you to fulfill your potential a lot more, because there is also research showing being clinically obese, being overweight, you're very inflamed, you have very poor health markers, which then correlate to poorer brain activity as well. So being in shape, carrying relatively lower levels of body fat, again, a huge contributing factor to someone wanting to maximize their brain output as well. So it's not just how you look, it's not just being proud of where you are, but if you want to be a high performing, functioning person, then your physical health is also part of that too. Now, again, if being overweight and obese makes you happy and it makes you productive at all the things that you want to be productive at in your life, then fantastic. Well done to you. That is brilliant. But as Ed said, what's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, when that pat on the back being like, hey, it's okay. How's that going to help when, you know, you're potentially on your deathbed, or you die early, or you got diabetes and your limbs are being amputated? That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, gruesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope you're not eating your breakfast when you're watching this. Going back to your point though, Akash, on the cover model of, you know, how can you justify that kind of being healthy? From what I've seen on it anyway, a lot of the time the argument from that side is they're coming back with, examples of people who are deemed to be have metabolic healthy obesity. So you can be obese, but potentially two people can have equal body weight, equal amounts of body fat, but depending on where it's distributed in the body, will have an impact on their metabolic health. So if you have more of your body fat on your stomach, then you're likely to have more of these issues than if it's, say, on your bum and on your thighs. And so this is something that I've seen be used a lot as an argument of no, you can be overweight, but you can still be just as healthy. Now, if you look at the BMIs, there's kind of I think a bit more, the category this would fall into would be between like 25 and 35, where in that overweight kind of category, early obesity, and then from 35 onwards, it's pretty clear that if you're just above that, then you're going to be having issues either way. But I was actually kind of reading and looking into a bit more of this stuff on metabolically healthy obesity. And Spencer Nadolsky was talking about how it's actually termed in the research and what constitutes it. And he was basically saying that they look at 4 factors. So it's blood sugar, blood pressure, triglycerides, and your HDL levels. And they basically say that if you have 3 out of 4, in research, they were looking at if people had 3 out of 4 of them, if 3 out of 4 of them were bad or elevated, or within the HDL situation, it'd be low levels. But if 3 out of 4 of those were bad, then you would be deemed as metabolically unhealthy. But it means that you could have 2 of those issues. So you could have high blood pressure, really high blood sugar levels, but still be deemed as metabolically healthy. And he was then saying that the reason they had such poor parameters or poor restrictions around what's healthy, what's not, was because they didn't have enough people to do studies if they did tighter restrictions. And I think everyone would argue that if you had high blood pressure, high blood sugar, you're still not metabolically healthy, but just in the confines of the study, you fall into that category. And so whereas I think it might be 30-40% of people who are overweight could be deemed as metabolically healthy, if you actually look at who's got 0 of those symptoms, which is what I think most people would actually consider metabolically healthy, he was saying it's nearer to up to max 4 or 5%, he was saying. And the numbers are so low, they can't really do research on it, which is why they've had to do such poor definitions for what metabolically healthy actually is. So I think this is something where there's been limitations in research, but then people obviously don't dig into that. They see a headline, they'll pluck that, and that obviously fits with this health at every size movement. So they're obviously more than happy to use that as their argument there.
Yeah, and on that, if all of those individuals, all of them, lost 10 kilos, would they all be healthier or not? Yes, I would say I would make that assumption that all those people will then improve all those metabolic markers. We've seen that in research. Weight loss in and of itself, it doesn't matter. Remember the Twinkie diet guy? I love referring back to him. Literally, he controlled his calories, lost 10 kilos, lost a substantial amount of weight. All his blood markers improved. Inflammation, blood glucose, blood pressure, all these things improved, even though his food choices were horrific in comparison to what we normally advocate. But because he ended up losing weight in general is most of the time going to be a fantastic way to improve all your metabolic markers. The reverse isn't true. Yeah,
and I think the research is quite clear that you don't even have to, get absolutely shredded. Like if you're overweight, or especially if you're obese, 5 to 10% weight reduction shows massive improvements in a lot of these basic kind of health markers. And obviously, if you continue to lose more, then potentially it'll improve further. But that first 5 to 10% is a significant improvement. Yeah. And for a lot of people, that's not by no means an unachievable amount.
I think where it goes wrong is in a lot of these body neutral movements, is what I think they call it, body neutral movements, is they've all suffered with some level of eating disorder, eating issues, relationship with food, yo-yo dieting, whatever it may be. And I think the issue really lies in the approach you take in losing that weight. If you take an approach which is holistic in nature, you're going to do it in a good way. If you do it in a restrictive crash diet sense, you're going to set yourself up for these big rebounds, and you'll probably set yourself into that state of gaining more and more weight and worsening your relationship with food. And when you look at some of these articles in the Cosmopolitan, for example, what they say is like they adhere to the body neutral movement because when they're part of that community, suddenly they're not fat shamed. They're told to embrace what they are. They're told to love what they are, and they're told that what they're doing is okay. And then you hear about them saying, I've had a bad relationship with food in the past, but now I've learned to accept that this is who I am, and this is what I consider to be healthy, etc. And I think that's where the issue has lied, is that if they'd just taken a better approach in the first place, if they'd potentially addressed the issues that caused them to really aggressively gain weight, I think they'd be in a much different position compared to what we are now, whereby now this body neutral movement is surrounded by more and more people. It normalizes it, but also when you're in that community, in that culture, it feels like that's the right thing to do, and that it's all good. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It was I think it was a big reaction to the diet culture, which again, we know how disastrous that has been because of what you just mentioned. Just because people taking ludicrous quick fix approaches to try to achieve this goal, and everyone likes to throw out that stat of 95% of diets fail, right?
That's not a legit stat.
I know. That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
The thing is, because people who actually are successful, they don't go into research labs and be like, hey, guess what? I've kept it off. I have done that. It's just the people who have failed are the ones who are more vocal about it. And that's where that sort of stat came about. So, and we've seen it, a lot of the methods that we try to implement with as many people as we possibly can. We've seen that when methods are implemented correctly in a timely fashion, and you have a plan after the diet and a plan for the plan after the diet, you see much greater success throughout the entire lifespan. And you see people through education gain a better understanding of nutrition, gain a better understanding of how their body works, all these things. And then again, as Ed said earlier, it empowers them to take control and to not just be like, oh, this is just the way I am, because that's nonsense. It's not just the way you are. You have a lot more impact on what you can do with yourself than you think. And I think that's probably the most piercing comment that really gets to me, what you said earlier, Ed, just that acceptance, right? It's just like, no, this is just the way I am. It's just so like self-defeating. And as I said, it carries over to other areas of your life too, which is horrible way to live.
I think if you've had a really bad experience with the diet culture, it can be natural to then want to go all the way the other end and just hate it. But I mean, I'm in agreement that the war on obesity, however, is being lost on a worldwide scale, and the way that it's currently being dealt with isn't working. But in my opinion, that doesn't mean that like weight loss or getting to these healthy weights isn't the right thing to do or can't be done. But it's just the method of how it's going, how it's being currently implemented, just isn't working. And I was looking at this study I think it's called the Look Ahead study. It seems to be deemed as like the superior study around kind of like weight loss and then maintenance beyond that. And because I think the biggest issue just with the whole diet success and failure, there isn't really defined terms of what success and failure is. Like, how much weight do you need to lose? How long do you then need to maintain it? How much of that weight loss has to be maintained to be a success? Because if you lose 50 kilos over the next 5 years, you gain back 5 kilos. Is that success or failure? Do you have to hold that 50 kilos? Does it have to be for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever? And there's not that much research that's then looking. I know it's looking like you have to maintain at least a certain amount of that weight loss up to after 2 years. There's a big the chances of maintaining it long term increase substantially. Up to 5 years seems to be the real number of like, okay, yeah, this is pretty. It's pretty odds on that you're going to be maintaining this long term. But again, the research there isn't that much there. But just going back to that study I was saying, they found that the people who lost weight and then were able to maintain it, I think they went up to 8 years post intervention. So it's quite a long time. They had like a few things in common, and they found that few of these things that were in common was that a holistic approach was taken. So it's not just, let's say, what the government were doing around COVID in the UK. It was just like a 500 calorie soup diet or something like that, wasn't it? Like, that's just like a nutritional change. Do that, go. The ones that did better had a holistic approach in terms of looking at lifestyle stuff. There was more education in there. So giving them more of a, like what we would deem like a transformation rather than just a diet change. They also had more touch points with other people. So some of this was with nutritionists and dietitians, but also some of it was just with other people on the program. So I think after a certain amount of time, their contact, I believe this is right, with the nutritionist stopped, and they were just communicating with them with the other people who'd been through a similar process, which then shows, how important like peer level and community accountability can be, and having a community. And then another massive one was then that seems to have come up is that if they have a plan for afterwards, as we know, most people, they finish, they have their photo shoot, their checkpoint, their holiday, whatever it is, you're pushed to that, but then you don't really know. And I think I've been there, I think you've been there, Akash, where like hasn't then gone well, but having a plan in place for after the diet makes a massive difference. Now I was like reading and listening to this stuff and just thinking, well, like we're given like a holistic approach. We're trying to look at like lifestyle mindset stuff as well as the exercise. We're trying to create, and we have like created a community that, to support people. We have a 5-phase model, and when you hit the end of the diet, let's say in quotation marks, or is that checkpoint, that's only phase 2. You're not even halfway through the journey in terms of the phases, which just shows how much we're putting an emphasis on after there as well. So I mean, it made me even more happy and proud of like what we're doing. But I think it just shows that actually diets and losing weight, it's not that doesn't work, it's just how it's currently being implemented doesn't work. And that we need to not just shift the focus from, okay, we can't win, let's accept losing, when we go, actually, let's change the tactics and how we're approaching it. And, then I think from my experience with using this holistic community approach with a plan, I think it's quite clear that it does work. It's not easy. You have to fight through that muck to make sure that you can address those issues that have ultimately got you in the first place. But it is achievable for sure.
It's simple, not
we see
easy.
it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, simple, not easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you got a mic drop there.
I know. I felt like I was doing some kind of Martin Luther King speech there. No, but something else that did come up as well, which I think would be useful for people to hear, is another couple of things that are really common for people who do manage to keep weight off long term. Some other characteristics are they found weighing the frequency that you weigh yourself. Now, I think this can be specific to people, because I know certain people don't have good relationships with that. My thought on that is potentially that working on that relationship would actually be a great thing to do, because it's the scale itself isn't doing anything against you. It's just like a calculator. It just gives you some numbers back when you look at it. It's then the emotional attachment you have to that. So I think if you don't have a good relationship with the scale, I'm not saying you should definitely jump on the scales every day from tomorrow, but I would start educating yourself more around why things can fluctuate. The scale doesn't tell the full story. We've got articles on this. If you type in any of the things I just said there with R&T in front of them in Google, you'll find great articles on that. But once you start to become more educated on those things, you then aren't as emotionally attached to the scale. But by having that accountability and that just that gauge of how things are going, with the knowledge of what can make it fluctuate, that has been shown to help a lot with weight maintenance. Another massive thing is exercise, and it's not just calories in, calories out. I know there's people a lot smarter than me believe that there's also some stuff to do with helping to regulate hunger. You're less likely to want to overeat if you're being active, and then obviously just the stuff we all know in terms of cardiovascular health and things like that. So yeah, there are other things to definitely have as a part of your lifestyle if they're appropriate for you, and you want to keep that weight off longer term.
Yeah, and a flexible approach to dieting or nutrition. A lot of people don't follow like a set either low carb or keto or carnivore for long term, right? It's the people who had less rigid restraints but followed principles in maintenance, surprisingly, not really, also had a lot of success in the future. So yeah, those are all very good points. And so it's all the stuff that we do, which again is fantastic. So yeah.
Fantastic. I think the argument for why you should be looking after your health is beyond beyond refute, right? There's no real counter to all of these things. One thing I think would be interesting to touch on is the concept of, or the issue of child obesity. So, we talk a lot about adult obesity and how it's up to us to solve the issues that's going on, that's got us there, and getting out of that physiological and psychological place. But child obesity, what's your thoughts on child obesity and how we can potentially tackle it? Because I know it's massive in first world countries, especially America. I don't know what the stats are, but they're getting worse and worse every year, those stats, right? It's not too good in the UK either. What's the issue with child obesity? Whose fault is it? What can be done about it? And what are the real dangers of child obesity that potentially we don't often get exposed to?
I think with regards to whose fault, I think it's definitely a combination of things, just like with adult obesity too. I think obviously the child's caregivers are playing a huge role in the food that child receives, the behaviors that child decides to sort of involve him or herself with. So you could say, well, it's the parents' fault, but then I would also say, well, how do they know any better? I think, you know what I mean? So can it technically be their fault because they continue to feed their child? But if we were to put ourselves in their shoes and we had no idea about nutrition, we had no idea about anything, and we saw that our child was happy when they ate, oh, okay, you sort of just keep doing that, right? Because you don't know any better. You want to make your child happy. You want to see a smile on their face. You don't want to see them upset. So
What if you're seeing them getting bigger and bigger, though? Is that again an education thing that they don't know why it's dangerous?
Yeah, I'm not going to throw that out the water. I'm not going to say that's not a possibility at all. I definitely think it can be. There are so many people who are so very uneducated when it comes to nutrition, or they think, yeah, as long as my child is smiling and they're happy, that's me being a good parent. So I think all these factors come into it, but genetics too. If you come from an overweight family as well, the chances of you becoming more overweight are also increased. But again, genetics are not everything. They can still be worked with. Your socioeconomic status too. We know that's a big thing. If you don't have access to good food around you, if you're living in a strip full of fried chicken places, like you walk outside and all you have is fried chicken everywhere, it's more than likely that you're also going to be obese because of your environment and your status. But I fundamentally think the biggest factor is the parents getting educated on what to feed their child and how to look after their child so they don't run into these complications later on. And again, it's not just from a aesthetic, or I want my child to look like He-Man or anything like that. It's more, I want my child to be a healthy, functioning adolescent who can maximize his brain power while they're developing, right? Because as we spoke about earlier, AB, the book Spark spoke about this as well. Getting kids to rigorously exercise prior to learning, or the kids who are able to exert themselves frequently, also showed a correlation in being able to learn more effectively and apply themselves more effectively. So all these positive things came from just incorporating more activity into a child's day-to-day. So if you're neglecting that, or if you're withdrawing that from your child and you're just making them play video games or getting them on their iPad just to shut them up. I've seen parents do this, which is pretty, again, I don't have a child. I can't understand it, right? But if your way of dealing with your child screaming or whatever is, oh, here's an iPad, leave me alone, then I don't know. I don't know about you. Pilka, you're an adult. You're a parent. You can back me up here. Like, I don't know how you would deal with that situation, but I'm seeing like that more and more. And I think it's things like that, getting your kid to sit in front of a TV all day. I don't know about you guys, but when we were younger, this is going to make us sound like we're super old. But we didn't have like, PS4s and PS5s. Like the best we had was like Nintendos, like little Game Boys playing Pokemon. And you can still move around while you do that. But a lot of the time, we were doing stuff outdoors. We were running around quite a bit. We were very active, I would say, But compared to now, like the standard is completely different. And even primary schools now, the way that they educate students and the way that They sort of just sit in front of a screen as well. And I don't know, the whole environment seems to be very obesogenic, so to speak. But those are my perceptions. Those are my views on someone who has no kids yet.
Go on, Ed. Well, what's your thoughts? Obviously, as a young dad.
I think like to go over, like, just to maybe like confirm, well, to agree with Ivan in a few things. I think like the socio-economic thing is massive, and I think the biggest influence that's going to happen is going to come from the government and the big dogs at the top, because putting taxes on things, etc., like more education, putting people in an easier and better position to make good choices and to live a more I guess educated and just like healthy lifestyle is going to come from that. But I'm a big firm believer that we all have responsibility in ourselves to look after ourselves. But then also I think if you bring a child into the world, then that falls within, in my opinion, your remit as well. I know before having a kid, I think I would have been a bit more clear cut on it, probably, in terms of feeding junk food, iPads, TV, whatever. And so although I think that there's nothing wrong with, and I don't think this is what you're saying anyway, but I don't think there's anything wrong with having those things in moderation, and especially if there are times when, like, the truth is, if your kid's going absolutely nuts, giving them something to eat or something will normally, or at least from I've got one kid who's like 18 months, so I'm by no means like an expert here, but we'll normally shut them up. If you're in the middle of a shop and they're going absolutely crazy, screaming or whatever, you just want that to stop. And so, like, I think that it's something I've definitely done before. Likewise, if there's things kicking off or you need to concentrate on something, handing them your phone or something for 2 seconds can just give you that peace of mind for your own mental health, but also just concentrate on something else potentially like is urgent or things. I think obviously there is a tipping point with that, and it comes from, is it just for those situations, or what percentage of their diet is then being made up of that junk, etc., etc. But I think it's definitely the especially until the kid is, well, at least like 11 or 12, but it's probably even older, because ultimately if they're living with their parents, the parents are buying the food, you're in control of their diet. So I think ultimately what you put in the shopping basket is going to determine what goes in their mouth. My son can walk, but I don't think he can't exactly work the checkouts at Sainsbury's, so he's not buying his own snacks. So yeah, I think it's that. I think as parents you have to take responsibility for it, to be honest.
This is the thing. Most people across the board, they don't get overweight from what they eat going out. They get overweight from what's in their house. It's having an abundance of junk in the house. It's just the day-to-day meals that are so calorific that's causing the big problem. And if that's all that's coming into the house, if the shopping basket is full of junk food, it's no wonder people are gaining weight, right?
And I would have thought, I don't have any evidence really to back this up, but just from my experience, that I reckon a lot of people are giving their kids relatively nutritious meals. I think it's then just having those snacks just to shut them up between. It's probably, and from again, my limited experience, but it is tempting to do, because when they are going crazy or you need to concentrate on something else, it's the easiest and most reliable way to do it. But I think it's actually really similar to just how we deal with adults with it as well. When you think there's a stress or there's an uncomfortable situation, whether it's like physically or mentally, people just grab food just to deal with it, right? Just like that. Had a bad day at work. Instead of like going home thinking about, all right, maybe I need to talk to my boss about this, or introspect on their own performance, seeing how they could have improved, or whatever it is, actually dealing with the issue. Or just, even if you can't deal with it at source, just coping with it in a better way, going for a walk, calling a friend, doing a more positive way of coping with the stress. It's easier to grab the biscuits. It's exactly the same thing. Although you're not putting the food in your own mouth, you've got a child who's screaming at you or needs attention or is being disruptive, whatever it is. The quick fix and the easy fix for it is to hand them the biscuit, because they're then going to be happy. They're not going to cry anymore. They're going to sit there, eat a biscuit, be happy, and you then just got this headspace. Whereas just the same way of, you need to be more proactive, and it's harder in the moment, but working through that muck or dealing with the situation head on helps you get past your own stress. Sometimes you need to not give the biscuit, and it is from my experience, just let them either have a little tantrum or try and sort the issue, or okay, you're bored, instead of just giving you like, maybe all right, I'll get off my phone or whatever, let's go outside and just kick a ball around, or I'll chase you around the garden, or all right, why don't we just get your toys out so you can use them, you know. It's sometimes it's just that it's the quick fix, in the same way that you can deal with stress by just giving yourself a biscuit, it's just giving it to them instead, just to kind of shut them up. And just a caveat, like I know when the kid is screaming, it's like mental torture after a while. Like it's not easy. I find it that harder than doing it for myself. Do you know what I mean? But I think it's just one of those. I think and that's why I said I don't think it means that you should never do that. But I think if it's becoming a regular thing, you've still got to realize and take ownership of it. You're still the one giving them that crap food.
Yeah. On that note as well, Ed, I just remembered I was hanging out with one of my good friends and her child for like hour and a half to 2 hours, and I can completely see a parent doing that. Like I was just like, I need to get out. I can't. But I think what you just touched on prior to that point was super interesting. And do you think then, if that is how you were raised as a child, you got a tantrum, you fed yourself. Could you think that could have been something that has been developed over years and years and years? So when you do run into stress in your adult life, you have this subconscious decision to be like, I need food to make me feel better.
I think that's a massive point. But I also just think, even in terms of just how you are as a person, if every time you've got a tool upset, and if my son's like any other kid, it's not like they get a bit annoyed. It's like, right, you're not allowed the keys. He'll just flip. Like, you know, he's only 18 months, but I'm praying we're hitting like the terrible twos, because like his attitude is just like, he's definitely developed an attitude recently. But it goes from 0 to 100 like that. And so it basically means that if every time I was then just to give him a chocolate bar, it's like that Pavlov's dog thing, isn't it? Where you connect the bell and the salvation. If he realizes every time he just kicks the wall or starts screaming, I'm just going to pull out a chocolate bar from my pocket, then like he's going to keep doing that. And then like, there's that association with food, but there's also just that personality trait of like, I want something now, or I'm just going to kick off. And, you know, I think as you develop, you get more awareness, more empathy, and these things that develop later with kids than maybe where my son's at now. But it's also just not a character trait that I think you want to. I wouldn't want my kid to grow up, you know, I wouldn't want to foster that, you know.
Yep. So interesting. Very fascinating. It's a big responsibility when you think about it. It is that fine line. You want to, as you said, sometimes you just need that breathing space, right? But if he always gets used to, okay, every time I kick a wall, Dad just gives me chocolate. Yeah. So I'm just gonna start booting walls. Could you then, if I don't know if you've thought about this, you probably have. Could you then, could you use food as a reward, but use things like fruit, use things like vegetables, use things that are not labeled as treats or what have you, and then you can maybe start incorporating this healthy relationship with food, or this desire to want to eat nutritious food because you like eating nutritious food, or you develop a taste for nutritious food. Do you think that's a thing, or do you think if your child's been exposed to like ice cream and chocolate, it's just that's it, right?
I think it could. I think something that I've been quite aware, because obviously with maybe like the education I've got on food, but then also like what I do for a job and things, I don't want to take it too far with him in terms of making things too conscious. And so I've really tried to make sure that he eats nutritious food, but in quite a relaxed way. And there's not this
big thing.
Yeah. And like, I don't know if there's a complete right or wrong here. So this isn't my area of expertise, but I don't think until he's a bit older, I'd want him necessarily to see me always weighing my food and things like that. You know, maybe that's something we could talk about, but I think I would quite like just to have food as a thing, but not really have it as a punishment or a treat or anything like in an ideal world. And, you know, whether if he's annoyed, right, well, let's just find something. It's probably just because he's bored or wants to do let's just do something.
Let's use your brain. Let's do a problem together. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, potential on that. But something that was fascinating actually, when he first started eating, he would just regulate his eating just by how hungry he is, which I know sounds like the most obvious thing in the world, but how many humans actually do that? And it just shows how conditioned we've come just through life and whatever to, you either eat a set amount because it's on a diet, or a set amount because that's what you think it should be, or this amount of calories, whereas he would just eat till he's full, and then you could literally try and give him some more food and he's like putting his head away, he doesn't want it anymore. Whereas like for us, we'd probably be like, all right, I'll just finish the plate or whatever, but he'll just have, he's obviously not aware of, you know, like throwing any food away or anything like that, so he just eats what he wants and then stops.
Primal.
What a life.
Yeah, but also on that, I think it just shows how the food industry have obviously, you know, made these junk foods like so appealing. The other day, I put a few different things on the table for him. So it was like, one of them might be like some kind of fruit. I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was like strawberry or something. But then there was also like a bit of chocolate or like a biscuit or something like that. And there was something else, I can't remember. But it was like 3 different bits for him. And I was like, all right, let's see what she goes for. And straight away, like, just picked up the chocolate. So I think like he's already, you know, once you've tried these things, you already start to like make those links, don't you? But luckily he eats virtually everything. He does like fruit a lot. He eats, you know, like vegetable stuff we give him, but he definitely does like chocolate and that kind of stuff. And then if I just gave him like a massive bowl of chocolate, like, and that he would probably have that every meal if it was up to him, you know.
All the joys to look forward to, eh, Ivan?
Yeah. We'll see about that.
So to conclude, what's the conclusion on health at every size? Can you be healthy at every size?
Short answer, no. Long answer, maybe. It depends.
Yeah, I would say try to, if whatever size you are, try not to link your identity or your self-worth to it. But there's clear research to show that being within certain, you know, weight ranges or parameters are more advantageous for health. So I would recommend you taking a holistic approach, having a long-term plan, and surround yourself with like-minded people to increase your chances of maintaining it long term.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
and on that, I'll give a more serious answer too. The weight that you're at, where you feel you're functioning well, you're happy with everything, you feel great, all those things are working for you, your sleep is good, all your biomarkers are good, whatever your weight is, that's it. That's probably a really easy way to look at it. If everything in you're feeling great, you're functioning well, all that stuff is on point, then your weight is what it is. Really easy.
Bang on. There we go.